People and processes, two very different parts of a business and equally as important. Business coach Marcia Erickson shares with us today how the soft and hard skills are equally so important in scaling a business. She gives us tips on the how for the systems and processes when it comes to growing a business and why it is so important in terms of supporting the team. And then the people side, some of the soft skills and tips she shares on how to develop more of those as a leader and the keys to building a winning team. Marcia, great to have you on the interview.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Why business coaching for you?
Wow. I have a previous career, 20 years in healthcare administration. So spent the year in planning. I was doing internal coaching and have done everything within a healthcare system aside from probably supply chain and finance. So started with strategic planning, business development, did operations, felt like I needed that experience, and then ended with medical staff affairs and specialties, both inpatient, outpatient. And when I left that career, I wanted to take all of those things. When you're in healthcare, like several other industries, it's very insular. That's all you do, right? You work with the same people, you interact with the same people, socialize, and it was limiting. And so I really wanted to be more involved in my community. And I wanted to serve different, I needed a variety of things. So I was coaching with other coaches. I joked that I had a whole line of coaches behind me at the time. I had 3 mentors and coaches. And it was after I took the Enneagram and I realized that I get bored in a certain place, right? I need variety. I need stimulation. I need challenges. And so it just all aligned at one point. And I was really going to make a career out of helping organizations with their strategic planning, because that's what I knew. That's what I was good at. That's what I loved doing. And I realized when I literally answered a LinkedIn ad, knew nothing about Actioncoach. When I came across it, I realized, oh my gosh, I have access to so many tools and resources, and I could offer different services to a wealth of other people. And so it just, from a business perspective, allowed me to hit the ground running quicker and faster. And really, it was the network of other coaches that really drew me in when I was doing my due diligence, realizing, coming from a very competitive environment, to come to an organization that was full of abundance. So if someone if someone did something great and hit it out of the park, they would share it. And that is not something that we did in healthcare very readily, right? We would develop a best practice and then we would never remember to share it with anyone else. And so that all excited me. And that's what drew me in.
Okay, great. So interesting, your background, so strategic planning processes, how is that now transferred to how you work with business owners and businesses?
It's interesting. It's really the soft skills that I actually specialize in. I'm an I on the disc, IS. And so I love people. And, most organizations are built on people and process, and I love them both. So I really find in our community, we are rich with engineers. We're a rich manufacturing community. And so a lot of my clients are engineers who either they need soft skills in their current career, they've left a corporate career and decided to open their own business and still need those soft skills, right? And they don't know how to necessarily run a business, but they know processes and data. And so I've kind of found a niche in that regard, just based out of our community. We also have a community we're in Iowa in the United States. And so we have a very large population of retirees. So we have a lot of people leaving industries. And so succession planning and handing off to second generation and things like that is another place where I've found a space here. So I love those things. So it is process, but I also love the people side of things.
That's often two complete different ends of the spectrum, people and processes. Isn't that interesting?
Yes.
But they love one or the other.
But we need both, right? So often I coach clients that often we feel like we immediately go to the people, right? They don't know what they're doing. They're their performance is low. They don't fit here. And it's like, but did they really have a really good, did you set them up to be successful with the processes that you have in your business? And so I like to make sure that we have both.
That's a great partnership. And obviously in the 6 steps operating system that we have at Actioncoach, it's the processes and systems come before team. Maybe talk to me about how that works. How do you teach businesses around that?
Yeah. So we teach that. I just did it today with a client. If you picture a circle, right, with the owner or the leader at the top, they often feel like they need to take care of their team, the customer, and the business. And in reality, if you have those systems and processes set up so that anyone can do it, that leader really only needs to focus on the team, right? So when you have that base set up from a system perspective, then you can bring in your team to run that. And we find that, I know we're gonna talk about some maybe mistakes that business owners make or opportunities that they could take advantage of, and knowing that creating a business that runs without them, if they're still running all those systems themselves, or they don't have systems and they're the one doing all the work and bringing in the sales, they're going to lose up to 50% of the value of their business, even if they hand it off, if they go to sell it. And so creating those systems and the team to run them are really their job, right? To really, really build an effective business.
So you mentioned mistakes that businesses make. Can you jump into that for me? Like, what are some of the common mistakes?
I see a lot recently of not knowing, well, where their money is, where the margin is, right? The whole conversation around margin and markup. They don't take into account all of their overhead expenses. And so they don't necessarily know what they make in terms of profit on each item. So they are making all of these sales and they're growing their sales and they feel like they're doing awesome. And yet I say, but what's the bottom line? And they're not making any money or they're losing money. And so I literally had to point out to a client that every new client you bring on, you are losing money. And so teaching that lesson, that is a hard lesson for a business owner to learn, because there's cash in the bank and there's money coming in and I feel really good. And I can say that I have a $500,000 or $5 million business, but I have nothing to show for it at the end of the day. So that I find myself saying that over and over and over again.
It's interesting because processes, you naturally go towards SOPs and kind of more operational systems. But what you're talking about is financial systems around money. Yeah, that's amazing. So, and so many business
owners. If you think about
are
dropping your overhead, the easiest way to drop your overhead is putting systems in place in your business. Right? So it's all intertwined.
Okay. So a business owner comes to you, they've got some challenges around, they don't have some systems in place, and they've got a team that are running around, in chaos. What's the first step? Give me some practical tips on the first step that businesses can implement.
First steps. What are the main systems that run your business? Do you have them written down? Do people know what they are? What's your management system? How are you holding people accountable, making sure, how are you measuring success? I guess would be an easy way. So I often start with a dashboard, right? We teach the 5 ways. What's your lead generation, your marketing? What's your sales strategy? And what is it yielding you? How many clients are you? I was in a healthcare strategy session this morning, so I'm thinking patients. How many clients do you actually convert? How many times are they coming? How much are they spending? Getting familiar with that and your operating margin, getting familiar with that first. And then what are the strategies you need to put in place? So where's the biggest opportunity? And then let's focus on that.
Amazing.
What's painful?
Yeah. And that's where the aha moments often come for business owners, where they realize, gosh, I haven't been making any, profit from new clients or patients, or I love that. So give me an example of a client that you've worked with that you've helped do this and now where are they at?
Yeah. So I have one who's newly on board with me, and it's exhausting for him, but running great business for 15 years, growing the top line, and yet cash strapped and not profitable, right? So it feels good, but you're not you don't have anything to show for it. And so really doubling down on showing him how to calculate those margins on every job. He hates it. He's right, fighting it, kicking and screaming, but he gets it. When I say, do you know what your most profitable service is? And he's like, no. So how are we going to market your most profitable service if we don't know what it is, right? Another great one. So we're just getting started, and it's hard for people to see the value in that right away. So that's an advice, is stick with it, right? Those things are all important, and they're going to net you, right? If you imagine you have 5 services, and one you're barely breaking even, and another one you've got a 20, 30, 40% margin. If we start marketing that one and you grow that one, imagine what that will do to your business, right? Letting go of D clients is huge. Letting go of those ones. I had a client once that was giving premier pricing to clients that she had had for 10 years and never increasing their prices. So we did the math, and I said, you're keeping them, and yet you're losing money on every client or every job that you do for them. And so she had to raise her prices, right? And she lost some of them, but guess what? You're not losing money anymore. So we increased her profitability right away. Others, a lot of what I do, to be honest, is challenge thinking and getting clients to think differently. So I had a client who's really, really smart, right? Engineer, left a corporate career, started his own business, was doing great, and yet wanted to invest some money in marketing. Another client stopped him and said, wait a minute, before you make that investment, once you sit down and talk to Marcia and actually put a plan together before you make the investment. And we saved him, tens of thousands of dollars. And he was just shocked at, once you sat and thought through that, we ended up going with a completely different strategy. I had a client the other day who just growing, he knows so much, but he will put the plan together, and then he'll come to me and say, okay, redline it. What am I not thinking about? What have I overlooked? How would you look at this differently? And sometimes it's just that outside perspective. He said, I have a candidate who is, he needs more money. He's experienced. He's going to bring revenue in right away. It was a sales position. I have another client who's awesome. If I didn't have I would hire her. She's going to take more investment in time on the front end. But I said, well, at the end of the day, what's the cost difference? And he said, in a year, it'll be the same. And I said, well, you can invest more money on the front end with one person. You can invest more time and energy in the other person. And he just stopped. He was stunned. And he said, this is why I call you. I said, you know the answer, right? And it turned out to be peanuts, but at the end of the day, when we really got into the dollars. So I love when I can challenge the way someone's thinking about something and give them a different perspective and pull the answer out of them.
Gosh, I just want to unpack a lot of what you've just said. First of all, Marcia, you mentioned that, sitting down, getting into the systems and processes and measuring your numbers can be painful, and often sends people into the fetal position because it is painful. But you've got to have a vision for why.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that important, and how do you kind of tie that back in?
I think it's bottom line, you're not making money. So I'm talking to the client. Bottom line, you're not making money. So it's lost somewhere. Where are we losing it? Where's it missing? Right? If you think about, that's why I love private business versus healthcare. I always say that in a private business, A plus B equals C. You make a sale, you spend some money, you get the balance, right? In healthcare, it's really not that simple. So if you're not getting the result you want, then something's missing. And if you can't answer that question for me, then we don't have enough information. So we need to go back and look. Right? So it's like, oh, but I'm making this much in sales and I'm making this much margin. If you're not looking at what all your expenses are, the bottom line still isn't what you want it to be. So you got to reverse engineer it.
And how many times do you see, like your client you mentioned was, in business for 15 years and not making any profit? I mean, how many times do you see businesses where they've been in business, they've got that, the MVP nailed down and they're making money, but they're not making money. And how often do you see that? It's like that ceiling that they reach. And then in order to get to the next step of scaling their business and growth and creating true wealth for themselves as a business, because we believe every, business should give you more life, why is that?
More common than we think. I was shocked. It's more so with the companies that have come to us after they've been in business for a long time. The ones that are saying, this is really hard. You wouldn't understand. People don't understand. The ones, and often it's the ones who from an image on the outside look like they're growing and they're doing awesome. And I think I made that mistake as a coach, like, oh, they don't need my help. And then you get in there and it's like, right? You really do. So I find those very interesting. I would say it's more often than you think. And it's often businesses that have been in business for a while and we weren't at the table early on. Whereas if we're brought in earlier in that like 3 to 5 year is my favorite, then we can start to impact those things early on and they don't have to go through that challenge.
Yeah, and lose 10 years of hard work without making any money.
Yeah,
What's the right net profit percentage talk to me about margins. What is and you hear business owners say all the time, well, that's not relevant for my business or my business is different. What's the right net profit percent that business owners should be taking out of their business?
My answer is probably not the professional answer. It's what they want.
Oh,
what do you want out of the business? Right? Meaning there's a lot of things that go into that. How much are you willing to put back? How much do you need out of the business? What's the typical for your industry is often what I will say. But what do you want and what do you need out of it? Because that gets to risk. How much do you want to reinvest in? So if you're scaling, you're going to give up some of that profit, right? For a period of time. If you're worried about paying, more than your share of taxes, you're going to put more money back into the business. So honestly, I would say it's what the owner wants. But I bet it's not zero or negative.
So the bigger picture is really important, is what you're saying. Mm-hmm. What do they want to do? Long-term goals.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, let's flip to team. And you mentioned the personality part of the relationship side of the business and why that's just as important as processes. The people side. What have you seen with clients that you've worked with around some challenges around people?
Yeah, it makes it or breaks it. I came from, healthcare's hard. It's very hard. And people love the mission. They don't necessarily love going to work every day, right? And it's interesting, the companies I work with, I probably had 5 conversations over the last week alone where people are like, I love my job. I love what I do. I love where I work. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. Tell me more about that. And it's owners and leaders who support them, believe in them, give them the resources they need. They value them. They're willing to have conversations around fit and get people to the right place. They're willing to put the right person in the right seat. I'm very passionate about that. They're able to recognize strengths and opportunities and put people where they're going to thrive. Whereas if you have the opposite, I have owners where even if there's a hard day, their team will do anything for them, right? They do not want to disappoint their owner or their leader. And those are the ones that are the most productive. They're the ones who get the best results. Those are the ones that are growing. So it's a direct impact on the bottom line, hands down.
So when you're a business owner though, and you're not making any money, and you're wearing all the hats, and you're doing the 80 hours in the business, I won't say it's hard, but like, where do you start when it comes to? You mentioned people fit, and creating culture so that you do have an environment like what you just mentioned. Where do we start?
I think, when you start out, you've got team members who are generalists, right? So I have one that started out with 3 people and everyone's doing everything. And then as you grow and you get cash flow, you get profitability, you're ready to scale, then you start to diversify and people start to become specialists, right? You get to put people in place that are, it makes it easier for them to focus on certain things. I just came out of a coaching session with a client who she's a middle manager, had been with the organization 30 years. And now they're at a place where they can, their org chart is growing. And so people get to focus on certain things. So I think that's how you scale and grow. And when you bring people in, you say, guess what? You're coming into a small organization. You're going to do a lot of different things. That also gives you an opportunity to learn a lot of different skills. And then as we grow, you get the opportunity to figure out what it is that you really, really love. But you're also going to be in a really small environment where we all get along and we have certain ground rules, right? Where you're going to have to abide by them. Those may grow and change over time, but we all have a common goal, right? So if you think about the keys of the winning team, we've all got a common goal. We've got our action plan that we all are responsible for, and we've got our own metrics, and we're all moving in the right space. And your job may change down the road, but we're all in it. We're all in at the beginning. That's the way I would.
You mentioned people fit. How do we work out what that good fit is? Like, we've got this role and we need someone to fill this role to do X, Y, Z. How do you work out what the right fit is for that role, if a generalist or a specialist?
Ooh. What do you need, right? I love having clients just draw out the org chart, right? No names, no faces, but what is it that you need to get done? So you start with the work, what needs to get done, and then you group it together and say, what skill sets do you need to get this accomplished? And then you start to put faces in there and titles in there, and then identify gaps. What do we have? What do we not have? Who do we need to hire in? What skill set do we need right now to take us from here to there? And that's what we're going to hire to. And then in fit, you make sure everyone's on board with it. If you're a small organization, right? Group interviewing, you've got to define that culture first, right? And put a label on it and define it and commit to it. I love doing standards of behavior activities with teams who are growing and changing and having them articulate how are we going to treat each other here and commit to it, because it makes hiring so much easier, right? You can tell someone before you come into our organization, this is how we work, and they can decide whether they fit or not.
I love how you've reverse engineered that. So you do the org chart with the positions first and then look at the skill set of the people and where they would best fit. So yeah, good takeaway. How do you maintain that? How does a business owner maintain that culture in an organization? Mm-hmm. Like, how often should you get together? How often should you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I came out of a strategic planning session this morning. We talked about values, and it was that exact conversation, right? Like, how often do we do it? And I feel my answer to them is when the environment changes, when something big changes, you should be revisiting it regularly, but you don't necessarily have to change it, right? Until something forces that change. Like, your values are your values, your standards of behavior, but things change, right? So how we work, right? If you think about COVID, it changed how we work. So the standards of behavior and our values didn't change, but how we work together changed. And so we have to go back and revisit and then say, okay, we're going to work differently now. Let's agree on what those norms are. I had one client that brought me in because they had an older generation and a younger generation on their team, right? Well, they work differently. And so how can we come up with some norms that meet everyone's needs so that we can do really good work?
And soft skills, you mentioned earlier, what are some of the soft skills that we can implement into our business?
Having conversations, being vulnerable, being open, lessons I had to learn myself. How do we communicate together, right? How do we have a hard conversation that we don't want to have, as opposed to, the worst thing you can do is avoid it, right? That's where things go south. So how do we communicate to each other? How do we make decisions? How do we build each other up? How do we provide constructive feedback? How do we get aligned? Those are all soft skills. How do we value things in other people that maybe we don't value? Adapt. When we talk about DISC, right? The first thing we teach is understand your style, someone else's style, then how do you adapt to that to be heard, to get to the goal and the result that you want. Those are all soft skills. Reading the room. It all comes down to adapting and being flexible with other people and valuing other people. And like I said, I work with a lot of engineers, and that's hard for them. And, you know, a lot of leaders are D personalities. So on the DISC scale, it's a dominant personality. They're direct, fast thinking. They want to get to the results. So I have several clients where it's like, wait a minute, you're way over here. You're already at the end and your team is way back there. So how do you bring them along and get them to where you are and give them an opportunity to get to the same place without, you know, I had someone the other day I was coaching, and I said, how would you approach this differently? Meaning, how would you open the door to this conversation? And she said, well, I would this, and this. And I was like, okay, you were like a mile through that door. And I asked you how to open it. And she was stunned. And she's like, I don't know.
Wow.
So that was her big takeaway, is approach, right? How do I approach this so that someone will hear me, as opposed to just telling them? She had the answer, right? She was right. But how do you get someone else to come along and not resist the answer because of how you approach them?
And meeting people where they're at's a big one too. So for people listening that really resonate with that D, dominant personality where they're just bang, 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 it's, what's a tip that they can sort of, is it listening? Is it, what's a tip on what they could do to kind of take the team on the journey with them?
Two things that I often find myself saying is, one, put yourself in their shoes, right? That's what a coach does, is holds up a mirror and says, wait a minute, let's look at this from a different angle, from a different perspective. So I'm often asking clients, now put yourself in that person's shoes. What do you think their lens looks like? What do you think they're thinking in? And it's always followed by, oh, you look at it that way. And then the other is being curious, right? I think curiosity gets us out of a whole lot of jams. Particularly D personality is going to be very objective and feel like they have the answer right away. So being curious. So when you say listening, yes, but you've got to be curious first, right? You've got to want to listen. And maybe that's the nature of what we do, is asking questions. We have to be curious. But what a way to break down a barrier, right? Is to actually ask someone what their perspective is and how they would approach it and things like that.
And what's the impact?
Those would be the two things I would say.
Yeah, I love that. What's the impact if they don't do that?
You could miss out on a whole lot of things. I mean, think about even in your personal life, right? We make judgments, we make assumptions. I'm a J. I'm a judge on the Myers-Briggs, right? But I've learned as a coach through my coaching training, right? You can miss a whole lot of things if you don't stop and listen and are curious about. If you just assume that someone feels or thinks a certain way, you can completely miss the mark and get really off track.
And lose team as a result,
Yeah.
And the cost to the business of having to find people to replace them and retrain them is massive. So lots of benefit in taking your advice. Thank you. I feel like we could do a whole other episode on vulnerability as a leader. I just want to touch on that sort of quickly. Vulnerability, because when you think about the challenges that a business owner has, if you just went to your team and just kind of, blurted out, like, I haven't made any money for 10 years, and you just download, that could probably have a negative impact. So how does a leader be vulnerable with the team?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was teaching 12-week management course, and someone, a young leader, but had grown up with parents who are leaders, right? Really strong leaders. So 20, 30 years ago, leadership and management have changed, right? And so she felt like, and I think a lot of us do, and a lot of us probably as women feel like we can't be vulnerable, right? We've got to be the smartest person in the room. We've got to have all the answers. I know that those are mistakes I've made in the past. And I value when someone can say, I don't know what tell me more about that. I'm not sure what you're saying. I had to do it in a session this morning. I don't know that program. So to be able to say, I'm confident in what I know a lot of things, but I don't know that particular thing. Tell me more about that. I think I just admire people that can do that. So I think to your point, it's knowing what to share and what not to share. I'm often saying, just like put yourself in their shoes, what's in it for them? What do they need to know? So a client said, how do I share financial data with my team? And I said, he said, I shared the P&Ls with them. And I said, no, they don't need to know it, and they don't understand it, but they need to know key things. So give them red, yellow, green, give them a seal. What are the 3 things they need to know? And tell them how you're performing. If you don't know something, I think COVID taught this to a lot of leaders. Everyone was put in a situation that there was no right answer, and no one had ever been there before. And I think that really catapulted a lot of leaders to say, I don't know the answer. We're going to figure it out. This is what I do know. This is what I don't know. We'll figure out the rest together. And I think what a way to develop connection. People are more connected it's been proven, you're more connected to people who you can relate to. Mm. And we can all relate to being vulnerable. We can't relate to not being, right? To always having the answer. And so, how do they know? That's interesting.
Well, it builds trust too, right?
Yeah.
Trust. Yep. And that's important in a culture.
100%. How do you know what that line is? I think you have to know your team, right? Yes. You have to know your team. That's where a coach helps. Is this okay? Is this not okay? I often tell people, if you don't know things about your team, then you're not spending enough time with them, and you need to ask, right? What motivates them? What do they need from you? What's in it for them? I think the more you know that, you know what line, where that line is in vulnerability.
All right.
You don't want to share too much, but enough.
No, yeah. We definitely need to do another episode on that one.
Just watch Brene Brown.
Yeah. Yeah, she's great. Well, that leads me to 3 questions for you, Marcia. Favorite book and why?
Yeah, I feel like right now it's Multipliers. I really like the book Multipliers. It really encapsulates a lot of things that we're saying, right? Different people bring different things to the job, and how are you capitalizing on those? Are you identifying? Are you putting people in the right seat? How are you showing up for your people? Can you adapt to their different gifts? So I would say Multipliers is probably my favorite right now.
And best coach or mentor that you've had throughout your career?
It's interesting. The immediate one that comes to mind was the hardest. My first professional job was the greatest. There was a team of 5 women, and we had a male leader, and he was hard. We describe it as boot camp, right? Like, he pushed us hard, but you know what? He loved us, and he nurtured us, and we grew so much professionally. It wasn't easy, but we learned how to think like an executive. We learned how to make decisions. He let us behind the scenes, right? We were leading the strategic planning effort in an organization. And I mean, what a more powerful we had a huge responsibility, right? And he wanted us to succeed as professionals, and that's why he was hard. So that was by far, that has impacted my career. It impacts my coaching every day. And then probably my coaching partner, right? From a coaching perspective, teaching me everything she knows about coaching and people. And, I find myself quoting things, right, every day. So those would be the 2 that come to mind.
And best piece of business advice that you've ever received?
A couple. One is probably directly related to my quote, which is do what you love and love what you do. And if you're not, then you need to make a change. Someone said this to me when I went out on my own, and it really, it holds true for all. I just went bye-bye. It's up to you now. Everything's on you, right? The good, the bad, and you get to make this what you want it to be. And I think regardless of the role that we're in, we get to make it what we want it to be.
Marcia, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. This is really fun.
Michelle Adams, your host here. Hats off to you for committing to your learning by listening to this podcast. And if you'd like some help implementing some of these strategies, then click the link in the description to find your local action coach. They can help you put these strategies into action and take your business and your life to the next level. In the meantime, like and subscribe so that you're the first to get our next episode. We'll see you soon.